was built to save Detroit and became the city's most famous skyline. Now the plan is to spend $1.6 billion tearing part of it down. How did Detroit's proudest icon become a liability? In July 1967, devastating civil unrest swept through Detroit, leaving severe social and economic scars across the city. Seeking a visible, monumental response to the crisis, Henry Ford II spearheaded a coalition in 1971 called Detroit Renaissance, uniting 50 corporate leaders. They rejected simple policy memos, wagering on a massive concrete and glass statement of confidence on the Detroit riverfront. The coalition commissioned visionary Atlanta architect John Portman to design a modernist, 7-tower, mixed-use city within a city. Ground broke in 1973 on what was then the largest privately funded construction project in the nation, costing $350 million. By March 1977, the first phase officially opened to the public, dominated by a central 73-story cylindrical hotel. The complex was built to project absolute modernity and corporate power, serving as the ultimate statement of renewal and hosting General Motors' global operations. Yet from the beginning, this towering monument was also an inward-facing fortress, structurally separated from the streets it was meant to save. Almost immediately, the Renaissance Center outgrew its role as a corporate office park to become the definitive visual shorthand for Detroit. Standing at 725 feet, the central 73-story cylinder, the Detroit Marriott, claimed the title of the tallest all-hotel skyscraper in the Western Hemisphere. This towering silhouette dominated postcards, travel brochures, and television broadcasts, transforming a massive concrete intervention into a skyline logo. To the outside world, this single, glass-wrapped cluster represented the entire city's identity. The fortress, designed to isolate its occupants from the streets, had instead become Detroit's physical brand, linking the city's civic pride to a structure that was increasingly difficult to ignore. John Portman's self-contained design, built to protect and insulate, quickly revealed its fatal flaw. At its base, a massive 4-story concrete podium and 2-story utility berms loomed over the sidewalk, acting as a physical wall that severed the complex from Detroit's street grid. Inside, the vertical city offered offices, hotel rooms, and retail, meaning visitors never had to step outside. But this inward-facing design cut the complex off from the natural flow of downtown life. As modern businesses began favoring walkable, integrated urban spaces, the Renaissance Center's isolating footprint became a massive liability. This structural isolation collided with a shifting real estate market. The sheer scale of the 5.5 million square foot complex grew increasingly difficult to sustain as regional office demand softened. With Detroit's broader office vacancy rates climbing toward 20%, the massive towers stood partially empty. What was once celebrated as a secure, self-sufficient sanctuary had transformed into an inaccessible island of concrete, raising a fundamental question: can an architectural icon designed to ignore the street grid ever truly function in a modern city? The slow decline of the Renaissance Center became an immediate crisis on April 15, 2024. General Motors, the complex's defining occupant and public identity, announced it would vacate its global headquarters. The automaker is moving its operations to Hudson's Detroit, a new development on Woodward Avenue, with the relocation scheduled for 2025. This decision followed years of shrinking office needs. GM's on-site workforce at the site had already dropped from 6,000 to fewer than 1,000. By leaving, GM stripped the 7 towers of their primary tenant and corporate identity. The departure transformed the riverfront complex into an empty 5.5 million square foot vacancy, forcing a complete rethink of how the site can survive without its anchor. In November 2024, General Motors and Dan Gilbert's real estate firm Bedrock unveiled a joint conceptual vision to completely restructure the riverfront footprint, with Bedrock serving as the primary development engine. The proposal moves away from the traditional corporate office model to address the impending vacancy. The plan centers on the selective dismantling of Tower 300 and Tower 400, the 239-story office towers sitting closest to the Detroit River. Demolishing these towers, along with the massive 4-story retail podium at their base, will clear the way for a 27-acre waterfront district. The newly exposed ground will support public plazas, open lawns, and a pedestrian promenade designed to draw visitors to the water's edge. Meanwhile, the remaining portions of the complex will be adapted rather than abandoned. The central 73-story hotel and the remaining office towers will undergo extensive retrofitting, converting vacant corporate desks into hundreds of market-rate and affordable housing units, modernized workspaces, and street-level retail. The planned redevelopment carries an estimated $1.6 billion price tag, shifting the project from a private corporate decision into a public policy dispute. General Motors has committed $250 million in direct cash to support the transition, alongside a $1 billion private equity pledge from Bedrock. But completing the work relies on securing public backing. Developers are requesting $75 million from the Detroit Downtown Development Authority. Of that request, $20 million would reimburse the demolition of the concrete podium, while $55 million would fund public plazas and new streets. This local funding is contingent on the state extending its transformational brownfield program before March 31st, 2027, which would capture an additional $250 million in future tax revenues. Critics argue that spending hundreds of millions in public funds subsidizes wealthy developers at the expense of schools, housing, and basic neighborhood infrastructure. Supporters counter that the public funding is necessary to open the riverfront, generate long-term tax revenues, and attract new residents. Ultimately, the conflict centers on whether taxpayers should help foot the bill to remake a site owned by private corporations. Clearing these towers presents an engineering challenge shaped entirely by physics. Because towers 300 and 400 stand directly on the Detroit River, the site's waterfront position limits any demolition shortcuts. A simple implosion would generate too many safety and environmental risks. A sudden collapse would send shockwaves through the area, risking the structural integrity of the remaining towers and the adjacent public riverwalk. Ground vibrations must remain below 0.2 millimeters per second to safeguard municipal water mains and utility lines. Instead, engineers will use a staged dismantling approach from the top down. This method provides precise control, safely containing asbestos while keeping debris out of the river. Here, demolition is a gradual process rather than a sudden event. On February 25, 2025, a coalition of heritage advocates launched a formal challenge to halt the demolition. Preservation Detroit, alongside Docomomo, U.S. Michigan, the Michigan Historic Preservation Network, and the National Organization of Minority Architects, submitted a letter of intent to the Detroit City Council. They requested a historic district designation study seeking a legal freeze to protect the complex. These groups view the Renaissance Center as a physical embodiment of civic memory born from the 1967 crisis. They argue the city has a public responsibility to preserve John Portman's complete architectural legacy, treating these towers as irreplaceable cultural monuments. The standoff over the Renaissance Center raises a fundamental question for modern cities. What happens when a civic monument no longer fits the community that built it? Beyond the immediate demolition debate lie vastly different visions for Detroit's riverfront. One potential future remakes the site into a high-density, housing-heavy neighborhood, while another opens the entire waterfront for direct public recreation. Some advocate for a scaled-down corporate and residential campus, while others push to preserve and adapt all 7 of the towers. Each path redistributes public benefits and private profits differently. As Detroit negotiates this next chapter, the city is ultimately deciding who gets to control its visual identity and whether its future belongs to corporate continuity or radical reinvention. Today, the Renaissance Center stands at a critical crossroads. As Detroit debates dismantling its most iconic symbol, we face a deeper truth. Cities cannot simply build their way out of the past. Watch our investigation into the Opal Tower next.